Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Big Hit. My name is Peyton Trollinger. I'm joined along Alex Donaldson, and today we're going to have some NHL content finally. We're going to do our season predictions. So we've noticed in past episodes, we can't really go through the entire 1 through 8 roster, 33 teams. That's a lot of time, and we like to talk. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have the first 3 teams at least, and then we're going to do the wild card. We're going to give our finals prediction, and we're going to predict who will win Lord Stanley this year. So let's jump right into it. Alex, you ready?
I am absolutely ready. I'm ready for the NHL season to get started, man. It's been so long. Still, I'm ready for another year of disappointment from the Flyers back at home, but I'm excited. I'm excited.
Well, since you mentioned the Flyers, we might as well just start with the Metro. Might as well. This is in my opinion, it's a very stacked division. Honestly, the entire Eastern Conference is. So we're just go straight into it. I think New Jersey wins. New Jersey's going to win the division.
Okay.
And honestly, I think they make a case for the President's Trophy. They have been developing that core for so many years. You know, they have Meyer. They're going to have a full season of Timo Meyer now. Plus, they have Bratt, who popped off, Heischer, Hughes, and the fence looks fantastic with Dougie Hamilton.
Yeah, I think New Jersey right now is in a really good spot because their young guys are up and coming, especially in that defensive area, as well as getting guys like Meyer, who has leadership experience in San Jose. You're going to fully develop him into your scheme. Obviously, they're thinking he's going to stick around long term. They wouldn't have signed him to that big extension if they didn't. And so I think they do have a very solid team, but I don't think that they win the division. Really? I'm actually going to give it to Carolina because I think that the Hurricanes have been, honestly, looking at the division, are the only consistent playoff contenders, and they have been for years. I will say, I think, like you said, it's a very stacked division. I actually think that in the past 4 years, it's fallen off a little bit. I mean, you have teams used to be at the top, like the Islanders, Flyers, and Washington, that were 3 teams heading into the 2020 playoffs that are probably not even going to scratch the surface of the playoffs. And we'll get into the wild card later. But I think that Carolina takes it because they are the team that's been there since, 5-6 years ago, and established themselves as a playoff team. So they have that core and personality. Where really that team, I think, is one of the deeper ones in this division. But you're right, all these teams are deep. So I'm going Carolina number 1.
Yeah, Carolina has some very impressive forward depth. I really like it. Peter, I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not saying his last name, but he is an excellent goaltender, very young goaltender that's going to back up Freddie Anderson.
Chekhov.
Yeah, I think third, we're going to go with the Rangers.
Okay.
That's where I'm going to put them. Kind of fallen off a little bit in the past couple years. They had their shot a few years ago, but were eliminated, and now going to have to kind of see a little bit more improvement. You know, they haven't named a captain. They have 5 alternate captains now, which kind of doesn't have anything to do with it. But, I mean, kind of getting a little older in that core. They're still a good team, though, and they're going to contend.
Yeah, and I like that you brought up the Rangers. That's who I have at number 2 in the Metro Division. And then I have at 3 the Devils because, again, they're an up-and-coming organization. I don't think that their peak is as big as the Rangers' peak is. I think the Rangers have a higher ceiling because, again, this is another team that's been around for a couple years and is a perennial playoff contender, it feels like, for the past 5 years. Honestly, ever since they've had Shesterkin. I think that their goaltending situation was a little bit rocky, I think, last year in the playoffs, especially underperformed. But I think he bounces back. I think Shesterkin is going to be a top 5 goalie in the league, not only now, but in also 6 years from now.
100%.
Because he is that good, and you have a goaltender backing a team that has leadership depth. I think I value that leadership above all else, really. And so that leadership will take you through an 82-game season. I think that they end up number 2 behind Carolina, and I give number 3 to the Devils. And no disrespect there, we both have the same teams going, just in a different order.
Atlantic is also a very interesting division. This is a division that has had success. You know, the Lightning have won the Cup. Now they're starting to fade. Bruins were on top for a while back. You know, they've made the Cup run in 2019. Ever since then, lost some pieces in free agency, some trades, and they're a lot older now. So they're not as good, but they still are in contention. I think with Toronto, I think they have to have the division. I mean, you can't take away from that core like four. You know, Matthews, Marner, just all those kinds of guys. And I mean, it's just such a talented group. This is a group strictly carried by talent.
That's fair. I like Toronto making the playoffs as a top team. I think if you look at this division and we're talking about consistency, I think Toronto's always in the running for up top. One thing I think is interesting about the Atlantic is that you have teams that are on the top of the league. I mean, last year the President's Trophy winners in Boston on top. Last year, you also have teams like Buffalo, who's up and coming and honestly became a powerhouse last year. Tampa and Toronto as well. These are top teams. I don't think this division has any mid-tier teams. Obviously, Florida also in there. But Detroit, Montreal, and Ottawa have perennially been lower. I don't think Ottawa, as much as they brought in good pieces, I don't think that they do much. And I know I'm kind of getting out of it. I'm strictly doing rankings. But I think I actually give the division to Florida. I like the Panthers because I think last year, I think a lot of people are thinking that last year was a fluke. They came in as a wild card team. I don't think anybody expected them to go as far as they did. But I think the fact that they did go that far shows that they have a lot of talent and depth talent, that they were able to beat out other teams in a stacked Eastern Conference. They were able to outlast so many teams. I think they can continue to do that in an 82-game season. So I think number one goes to Florida. And I'm going to throw my number two in here. It sounded weird. But number two, I'll give it to Buffalo. I love that team.
Okay.
And again, no disrespect for Toronto because I think that they go at 3, and I just shot all 3 off real quick.
Okay.
But Buffalo has so many rising stars.
Yes.
Just today gave out their extension to Rasmus Dahlin. 8 years at $11 million per, and he deserves every penny. He's a top-tier defenseman in the NHL, and because of that, because of the pieces surrounding them, they're a gritty team, and no play on words there. They are built to win games closely. They're not going to blow you out 8-2. They're not going to, but they'll win 4-2 games consistently and put streaks together during the season. I think that they are quietly, making a case for themselves. And the same reason why I'm putting Florida up top is these two teams, they're not built to blow you out of the water, but they're built to win. Okay. And so I think that those two teams are going to be there. And then at 3, it's going to be Toronto. It's going to be weird, but Boston falling out of it. But we'll get to that when we talk about wild card.
Very interesting. I'm kind of surprised you didn't bring up the Lightning. This is a team that's had success very recently, but as the time has gone on, they lost a lot of pieces. They really gambled with Tanner Jeannot. They lost a lot because of it and ended up not even going very far in the playoffs. And
Stamkos is on a contract year, and he's unlikely to stay around.
Exactly. If they make it to a spot, it's going to be on the back of Vasilevsky, because Vasilevsky, in my opinion, is up there in the top 5 goalies along with Shesterkin. It's so tough for me because I love Buffalo so much. I don't know if they get second though, because originally I was thinking maybe wild card, but I mean this is just such a good group. I'm honestly going to change it to 3. I think Lightning will probably get a wild card, but I think we'll talk about that. Bruins, I think, are still going to sneak at second, though. They've always been a very consistent group, and they know how to get there. They still have a good leadership group. Marchand has been there. He knows what it takes. Now flipping to the other conference.
You want to talk about wild cards?
Yes,
first
let's talk about wild cards.
Okay.
So wild cards, we'll go back to the Metro. It's really going to depend on the Atlantic wild card, in my opinion. I think the Pens, I'm not trying to be biased, but I think the Pens do have a shot at a wild card. They've gotten much better in the bottom 6. They got Chari picked up Eller. I think Nieto is going to have a bounce back year. And honestly, along with Vinny Hinostroza, I loved that signing. I love Vinny Hinostroza so much. It's a weird player. But I also think Tristan Jarry is going to do a little bit better. He had a kind of a subpar year last year. And with Nedeljkovic as his backup, a lot of people are going to say it's not the greatest backup, but I think he's still pretty solid. And I do think the Pens have a better depth than the Islanders for sure. So they'll definitely take that out. But again, it's really going to depend on what Florida, Tampa, and all those other teams do in the Atlantic.
I think I like that you touched on the Pens. While we're talking about the wild card, I will throw in there, I think my 2 predictions for wild card, I think they split it right down the middle. I think, I'm changing that. I'm doing both wild cards are going to the Atlantic Division. Okay. I think Tampa gets it, and I think it's honestly a coin toss between Boston and Detroit. Okay. I like Detroit's team. I think the Yzer plan has some faults, and I think that it comes up front. That's why I think if they do make the playoffs, it would be the second wild card. But I think it's got to be Boston and Tampa. But you touched on the Penguins, and I do want to say this because obviously it's IUP. It's the consensus favorite team around here, and I think the Pens do they have a shot at the wild card? Maybe. And I only say that because there is raw talent on that team. Mm-hmm. The thing is, this raw talent we've seen for years upon years upon years. And so I think it's not that the Pens are falling off and that they're bad in any way. But I genuinely think because of the age, because even though they did bring in depth pieces, these guys, Chari's in his early 30s. Mm-hmm. Eller is also, he won a cup with the Caps and he's been a journeyman since. Nieto's honestly on his last leg to come back. And so I think that the Penguins just get outpaced. Just specifically targeting the Penguins, I think they get outpaced to the playoffs. And it'll be a lot like last year where it can be a very, it's a push, but it's just going to be just short. And I think that the cracks set in last year, as much as, Dubas is in town, but I don't know what he can do with the team, with the cap that he has available, what else he can do. The Karlsson move, I think, helps the offense of the team, but hurts defensively. Yes. His first 2 years in San Jose, he was a liability on defense. And these are guys, he was playing with Vlasic, he was playing with Burns, guys that are great defensemen. And Pittsburgh does not have that support group ready for Karlsson. I don't think, unless the development works for like P.O. Joseph or Peterson.
Now over to the Western Conference. We're going to start off in the Pacific. I think the Golden Knights. I think they're gonna take the Pacific. They have a very solid team. I think they've learned from their very short existence that you need to rely on those depth pieces. I'm not going to stop talking about the depth because it truly is what matters when it comes to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Yeah. Adin Hill was phenomenal in the playoffs. And whenever Vegas acquired him at the back end of last season, he was still very good. Adin Hill, for me, has always been one of those goalies that are extremely slept on. And he is going to be backed up by Logan Thompson or something like that. Yeah. But, he's also very talented in his own right. I think that's a really good 1A, 1B tandem. The Oilers, I think we're going to go second. I just think that this is probably the best depth they've had ever. This has always been a top-heavy team with McDavid and Draisaitl, and they finally have some pieces that can help them. They signed Evander Kane. He's been producing for the Oilers. They have Connor Brown from Ottawa. Zach Hyman's always been good. McLeod, just to name a few. Now, a team that I'm very excited to watch are the Kings. The Kings, I think, are finishing third. They have a very insanely good center depth. It's ridiculous. They have more centers than they can deal with. There's some of them are going to have to play on the wing. Turcotte's going to play on the wing. It's just a very good team to watch out for. Alex?
Yeah, I like what you touched on with the Kings, and that's going to factor in. And for the most, I mean, I'm going to agree with you. I think the West is probably the most predictable division, or conference, I should say, in the NHL. Just because there is a huge talent gap. I don't think teams like Anaheim really make a chase. I think Calgary, losing their head coach they've stuck with for years and honestly built a team around, I think they're going to struggle to get back up. I think Huberdeau doesn't last his whole contract in Calgary. Places like Seattle, San Jose, and Vancouver, they've had runs recently. They've shown talent, but I don't think that they're built to last an 82-game season and then go deep in the playoffs. And so I'm actually going to mirror your exact predictions. I think Vegas goes first just because they have so much raw talent on the offensive side. I like the goaltenders. I think it's a little bit of a sleeper situation. Do I think Adin Hill is a starter that would work on every team? No. I don't think that he would be. He's a backup other places, but I think in Vegas, the scheme that he's around and the way the defense moves the puck in their own end, they're very responsible with it. I think that coaching staff has a ton to do with it, and also there's a ton of talent on that team. So I love Vegas going number one. I think two, Edmonton, like you said, I mean, the depth, I don't know if it's there to win it all per se, but I don't think for any Oilers fans out there that if you have Draisaitl and McDavid on your team that you're winning a cup. I'm going to say it right now. I don't think that those two win a cup on the same team because they occupy too much cap and that's too much talent.
Yes.
So they need to get rid of Draisaitl and get depth pieces because this team has potential because they're a playoff team. They are a playoff team, but I don't think anybody has them going deep because even places like Toronto, who we have going in the wild card, have a better built team than them. And so I think that Edmonton goes second in the division just because their regular season numbers are phenomenal. And then third, LA. I love the youth coming up. Byfield has stuff to prove.
Yes.
But I think Clark looks great in the defense, especially in the minor system last year. He looked phenomenal and very responsible, as well as looking at guys like Villiardi is still producing at an NHL level. And this is not a team that's going to shoot your lights out. This is not a team that's going to, just like in the East, this team is not going to, absolutely brutalize anybody, but it's a responsible team. You talk about center depth. Well, normally with centers, they're two-way players.
Yeah.
That's most common. And so you still have guys like Kopitar that are playing as well as the youth coming up. I think the 1, 2, 3 goes easy to those three teams.
Central Division. This division has probably had the most change, if I had to say, over the past few years, because this first team went from the bottom, now they're at the top, and that's the Dallas Stars. This team has a lot of very solid depth, and they're kind of tied with the Avs because the Avs are still a very good team, cup contending team. But in my opinion, my personal opinion, I think the Stars have the better depth production, and it's really going to come down to that to see who's going to claim first in the Central. Kind of like you said, it's going to be one of those coin toss situations.
Yeah.
Another coin toss situation in the same division are for the third and fourth spot, and that's the Wild and the Preds. The Predators just barely missed the playoffs last year, and I don't think people realize that. They have better goaltending than Minnesota. I really like their forward group, but with Minnesota, I think they have slightly better defense when it comes to point production. Spurgeon's still on the roster. And they have very good anchors in defense. So that's what I have right now. Stars, Avs, Wild, and Preds, but it's really going to just come down to those final games.
I like what you said about the Stars. I think they showed a lot of improvement, but I don't have them going at the top. I think Colorado takes the 1 seed easily because guys like McKinnon are on that team. And I compare it to Edmonton, where they have a franchise guy at center And instead of, continuing to build pieces down below him, instead focused on their defense and brought in McCarr years ago. And I think it's still obviously it's paying dividends, but you have a top tier defenseman on defense and a top tier offensive player. I think that this team just outproduces everybody else in the division. You look at, and I look at other teams and who goes to, I think Dallas does. I don't know if Robertson repeats what he did last year. I genuinely think it's kind of a fluke situation. And not that he's a bad player or anything, but he had a very good season. And I think teams are going to read that film and see the type of player he is and what positions he's put into and account for it. Because a lot of these goals and a lot of breakout seasons that you see are because of coaching oversights that let talent slip through. And my guy's Travis Konechny. I'm a massive Konechny fan. But he was a top talent one year, and then the following year he fell off and had around 50 points. And so teams see these breakout players and make note. And I think Robertson is no exception. But I think the Dallas Stars still win second because the Central is kind of a weaker division.
It is.
Obviously, now you go into 3, and some of these teams are getting mixed in with the wild card. Nashville, I like the pickups. Brian O'Reilly, I think, is going to be an underrated acquisition this year. I think that they actually have the best goaltending in the division. And I know Hellebuck just got signed to a massive 8.5, 7-year deal. That is going to bite the Jets in the butt because I don't think that they even scratched the playoffs this year. And so now they have, $19 million tied up between Scheifele and Hellebuck for 7 more years.
Yeah, that's rough.
Rough there. But I don't think that they make the playoffs. Who I do think makes the playoffs from this division, though, is like you said, Minnesota. And I have them coming in at 3 over top of Nashville because of their defensive core. They've been around for a while. Last year, they showed a lot of talent. Honestly, I think the fans of Minnesota finally got to see really entertaining hockey because Kaprizov is still producing at a top level. I mean, is he in the MVP conversation? Might be in the top 5. I don't think he wins it, but I think he's a top talent in the NHL, and you cannot sleep on that. I hope Allison coming up from the AHL this year, making that jump. He looked very responsible on defense, very aware. I think that'll translate well to the NHL. And of course, the goaltending situation. You have Flower back there. He's going to be he's going to produce. He's a regular season guy. Now, when it comes to playoff time, that's different. But yeah, I think Minnesota makes it at number 3. Do you want to take away the wild card for the West?
Well, I think the Preds will slip in that wild card, and I actually think the Jets could also squeeze in a wild card spot over the Canucks. I have the Canucks finishing. I have the Canucks finishing 5th, but I don't think we're talking about the Kraken. They had a very good season last year. I think they surprised a lot of people. Yeah. They have a very strong youth movement. They have Matty Beniers, and I'm pretty sure they still have Yanni Gourde. And but it's really going to come down to that goaltending.
A lot of these wild card teams are places with a goalie who's kind of has a lot of question marks around them, and I think no team has more questions around their goaltending than Chicago. But I think bringing in, and this is completely out of left field, I understand that, but I think Bedard coming in, as much as everybody hates it and they don't deserve it, Philly deserved it, why did he go to Chicago? But I think Chicago might surprise somebody. I don't think they get the first wild card, I think they get the second. Because really? I think that raw talent and that storyline that comes into it. We talked about Jason Robertson coming out and surprising a lot of people. People did not expect Robertson to have the season that he did, and because of that, I think the Stars made the playoffs, as they were not projected to be that high before. And so I think that the Chicago Blackhawks come out with a ton of surprises because it's a complete makeover on offense. And what's the term, wild card? It's a wild card. So you never have any idea what could come from that. But I think that they squeak in. But I will say the first wild card goes to Seattle. I don't mind Vancouver, but and I think all the question marks around Besser and Pettersson and seeing if these guys are going to be around long term. I think that's really going to get to them, and I don't think that their offense is going to really compete at a high level. I don't think they have in a while, and they've underperformed the past 2 seasons. Don't love Vancouver, but I do like Seattle coming in the first wild card position. I don't love it. I don't feel as confident about that as I do in the East. But Seattle definitely has a shot to repeat what they did last year.
Alrighty, so there are our predictions. Now we got to pick who is going to be the final 2 teams standing, and then who is going to lift the cup. This is so difficult, and I know we're going to look back at this video, and it's probably going to be completely wrong because so many things can change. We still have the trade deadline that we're not even close to. Oh boy, you're kind of just like blindfold shooting at a dartboard. But if I had to guess for the West, I like the Golden Knights going back.
That's fair.
I like the Golden Knights going back. Not just because they're finishing first, but I think they're the most complete team, in my opinion, in the Western Conference. The Avalanche are going to make another run for it, no doubt about it. But I think in the end, Vegas is just going to edge them out, and it's going to be one of those 7-game series. In the Metro, yikes. I'm going with Carolina. I think Carolina is going to be the best in the East. Again, you were mentioning very complete team all around. I think the Devils are a tad bit too young. They're going to make a run for it as well. I don't think they have the juice, and I'm going with Carolina to hoist. I don't know if Vegas can go back-to-back.
I think that's a good prediction. Obviously I like Carolina. I talked a lot about them earlier. And honestly, in the East, I think it's a coin toss between them and, oddly enough, Buffalo. Because, and you know what? No, I said this before we came in, is that, and I said this on the broadcast, is that Buffalo is a team that is built to win games. It is built to make adjustments after the second period. They have an absurd amount of comeback victories last year. And I think that they make the playoffs and they go deep. Now, it's a coin toss between them and Carolina. I don't know if they outdo Carolina, but for the sake of argument, I'm going to say they do. I'm going to say Buffalo. Honestly, it's going to surprise people. We didn't even talk about their goaltending situation, but I think Devin Levi is going to make the massive jump. He's going to be a great in Buffalo. And I am going to eat my words on that because I don't think anybody's ever said that since Eichel. We know how that worked out. But and then also I think in the West it's Colorado. As much as I do like Vegas, I don't think they repeat. And I think Stanley Cup hangover is very real. It's so tough to repeat unless you're a cap circumventing team like the Tampa Bay Lightning. And so I think Colorado takes the Western Conference. And it's going to be between Colorado and Buffalo. I think Colorado wins it, though.
So there you have it. There are the predictions for the season. We're going to see how wrong this is in a few months. And thank you for watching. I've been Peyton Trollinger for Alex Donaldson. Have a great day, everybody.